Have you ever felt like you're just, you know, learning facts, but without, like, really understanding how they all fit together?
Yeah.
Today, we're diving into a way of thinking that might change that.
Okay.
Systems thinking.
Hmm.
We've got excerpts from a Turkish book
That's
called
fun.
Eğitimde, Sistem, Düşüncesi. That's systems thinking in education.
Uh-huh.
Plus, some supporting research all ready to unpack.
That's going to be fascinating to see how this is being used in education.
Yeah.
It's about more than just theory. It's really about giving students the tools to tackle the kind of complex, interconnected challenges that we face in the 21st century.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, what exactly is systems thinking?
Right.
I feel like I've heard the term,
Yeah.
but could you like break it down for me and for our listener, of course?
Sure. Imagine you're looking at a forest.
Okay.
You see individual trees, maybe some animals, a river flowing through.
Hmm.
But a systems thinker sees the forest as a web of relationships. How does the sunlight affect the growth of the trees?
Okay.
How do the trees impact the animals in the flow of the river?
Mm-hmm.
It's about understanding those connections and how they create a whole
Yeah.
that's greater than the sum of its parts.
So instead of just memorizing, the names of different tree species,
Yeah.
it's about understanding the whole ecosystem
Yeah.
and how everything interacts.
That's a great way to put it. And that shift in perspective is what systems thinking is all about, moving beyond isolated events to see the interconnected systems at play.
I'm starting to see the potential here. But how does this connect to education specifically?
Well, think about some of the big challenges we face today. Climate change, pandemics, economic instability.
Mm.
These aren't isolated problems. They're the result of complex systems with multiple interacting forces.
So you're saying that if we teach students to think in systems,
Right.
they'll be better equipped to understand
Ah.
or maybe even solve these kinds of problems.
That's the idea. And it's not just about those big global issues either. This book highlights how systems thinking can be applied to teaching and learning in any subject, from math and science to history and literature.
Speaking of global comparisons, the
Okay.
book delves into why Turkey's scores on the PISA test, that's the Program for International Student Assessment, lag behind countries like Singapore, especially when it comes to problem solving. I found that pretty fascinating.
It is interesting. The book uses a tool called a causal loop diagram
Okay,
to analyze this issue. It shows how an overemphasis on national exams in Turkey might unintentionally be limiting students' ability to develop broader thinking skills.
That makes me wonder, how often do we focus on narrow metrics without considering the bigger picture? Is there a risk that teaching to the test, so to speak,
Yeah.
could actually hinder the development of critical thinking, problem-solving skills?
That's a really important question, and it's something that educators and policymakers are grappling with worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
The book's analysis suggests that when the focus is solely on achieving high scores on standardized tests, it can create a system where rote memorization is prioritized over deeper understanding and the ability to apply knowledge in real-world contexts.
Wow, that's a pretty big aha moment for me. It makes you realize how even well-intentioned systems
Right?
can sometimes have unintended consequences.
Absolutely. And this applies to our personal lives as well, not just education system.
Right.
The book uses a very relatable example of
Oh.
procrastination.
Oh, procrastination. Tell me about it. But
Yeah.
you're not suggesting that procrastination is actually a system, are you?
Actually, that's exactly what the book argues.
Huh.
It shows how procrastination isn't just laziness or poor time management. It's often a cycle of stress, guilt, and avoidance,
Oh.
all feeding into each other.
Yeah.
They use a tool called a stock and flow diagram to visualize this.
So instead of just beating ourselves up for procrastinating systems thinking, helps us see those underlying dynamics
Yeah,
and maybe even find ways to break the cycle.
precisely. It's about understanding the why behind our behavior,
Right.
not just judging the what.
Okay, I'm already seeing how this could be powerful for personal growth.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious about how the book applies systems thinking to those big global issues we talked about earlier.
Sure.
Does it give any specific examples?
It does. It uses systems thinking to model environmental challenges like population growth and resource depletion.
Mm-hmm.
It even mentions a specific example,
Okay.
the exponential growth of Nilufer yapraziu, or water lilies in a pond.
Water lilies.
Yeah.
How does that connect to environmental challenges?
It's a great illustration of how seemingly small changes within a system, especially if they're part of a reinforcing loop, can lead to dramatic
Okay.
and sometimes unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Think about how quickly a pond can become completely covered in water lilies if their growth isn't managed.
Right.
The book connects this to the real-world example of
Yeah.
the collapse of the Atlantic cod population due to overfishing.
So even small changes in a system, if they're amplified by feedback loops,
Yeah.
can lead to large-scale effects.
Exactly.
That's a bit unnerving, but also fascinating.
It is. And by understanding these patterns in nature, we can start to see similar patterns playing out in other systems, like the economy, social structures, and even our own personal lives.
Okay, I'm definitely starting to see the relevance of systems thinking to, well, pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually bring this approach into the classroom?
Yeah.
Does the book give concrete examples of what that looks like in practice?
It does. And what's really fascinating is how teachers are using systems thinking to teach even very young children.
Wait, really?
Mm.
I mean, systems thinking seems pretty complex. How do you explain that to a 5-year-old?
There's a great example in the book where a pre-K teacher used systems thinking to help students understand the dynamics of sharing toys.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What do they do?
The teacher created a simple system
Okay.
with 2 buckets representing available toys
Okay.
and toys being used.
Mm-hmm.
Then the children acted as the flow, taking toys from one bucket and putting them in the other.
Ah, so the kids could literally see how their actions impacted the overall availability of toys.
Exactly.
Okay.
It was a tangible way to introduce the concept of limited resources and the importance of sharing within a system. Even at that young age, they could start to grasp the interconnectedness of their actions and the outcomes.
That's incredible. I'm starting to see how even young minds can grasp these ideas when they're presented in a concrete and engaging way.
Yeah.
What about older students? What kind of tools are being used in classrooms to teach systems thinking at higher levels?
Well, besides the causal loop diagrams and stock and flow diagrams we've already mentioned,
Right.
the book highlights the use of behavior over time graphs.
Behavior over time graphs. What are those exactly?
Imagine a simple line graph. You can track how something changes over time,
Okay.
which helps you visualize patterns and trends.
So you could track, for example, how a student's understanding of a concept improves over time, or maybe how a plant grows in different conditions.
Exactly. And by visualizing these changes, students can start to see the relationships between different parts of a system
Yeah.
and how they influence each other.
This is also fascinating,
Mm.
but it also brings up a crucial question. Can we actually measure the impact of systems thinking on learning?
Right.
If it's all about understanding these complex connections
Yeah.
and the bigger picture,
Yeah.
how do we assess whether students are truly grasping those concepts?
That's a key challenge, and the book acknowledges this.
Okay.
Traditional assessments often focus on memorization or isolated facts,
Mm-hmm.
which might not capture the deeper, more nuanced understanding that systems thinking aims to develop.
Right, because it's not just about knowing the individual parts.
Right.
It's about seeing how they all fit together and influence each other.
And the book highlights that developing these higher-order thinking skills takes time and practice. It even mentions that it could take as much as 10,000 hours to truly master complex systems thinking.
10,000 hours. That's a serious commitment. But think about how much time we spend on things we're passionate about. Imagine dedicating that kind of focus to understanding how systems work. The systems that shape our world, our relationships, even our own minds.
It's a reminder that this is a journey,
Yeah.
not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
And while traditional tests might not capture the full depth of systems thinking, the real measure of success is how we apply these principles in our lives, making more informed decisions, solving problems more effectively, and ultimately creating a more sustainable and fulfilling future.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far. We've covered what systems thinking is, its relevance to education, some tools for the classroom, and even the challenge of measurement.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, we've only just scratched the surface.
Okay.
The next part of our deep dive will explore even more examples of how systems thinking is being used to address educational challenges and empower students to become true systems thinkers.
Great. I can't wait.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to it.
me too.
You know, I'm still thinking about that 10,000 hours figure.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that mastering anything worthwhile
Right.
takes time and effort. But it's also inspiring to think about the possibilities if we, dedicate ourselves to truly understanding the systems around us.
It's fascinating how much we can learn when we shift our focus from individual events to the underlying systems that drive them.
Exactly, and I'm really curious to see how this translates into real-world solutions.
Hmm.
Does the book offer any insights into how systems thinking is being used to address specific educational challenges?
It does. In fact, it walks us through a really interesting case study using a technique called group model building.
Group model building, that sounds intense. What
Yeah.
exactly does that involve?
It's actually a very collaborative process.
Yeah.
A group of people, in this case educators, come together to create a shared understanding of a system they're trying to improve.
So you could imagine a team of teachers trying to understand why students in their school aren't engaging with a particular subject.
Precisely. And in this particular case study, the book describes how a group of educators in Turkey used group model building to address the challenge of low PISA scores, specifically in the area of complex problem solving.
Ah, yes, we talked about that earlier. It's definitely a recurring theme in the book.
Right, and what's interesting is that through this group model building process, they were able to identify several key factors contributing to the issue.
Did they uncover anything beyond the overemphasis on national exams that we discussed earlier?
Yes, they did. While the focus on standardized testing was certainly a part of it, they also discovered other contributing factors, such as a lack of emphasis on collaborative learning and limited opportunities for students to apply their knowledge in real-world context.
That makes a lot of sense. If students were only learning facts in isolation and being assessed on their ability to recall those facts, they're not going to be well equipped to tackle complex interconnected problems.